Welcome to the Legit Football NFL podcast. Brian McFadden here. We're only got 2 previews left. We're going to be looking at the conference championship, and then after all that, it's just the Super Bowl. I don't think we're going to preview the flag football Pro Bowl matchup. Maybe I'm wrong. You guys might have different opinions. I've got the all-star crew with me today. The Pro Football Demon, Rich Jodice, Kevin Phillip Fox at the Buffalo Trill. Guys, it's almost over. Like I'm trying not to frame it like that, right? Because this has been an amazing season of football. But Rich, we're close to the end. Can we just appreciate what we have, or do we have to start thinking about when it's over?
I don't look at it as we're close to the end. The games are close to the end, but NFL season really is all year long now. And then right away we turn right to the draft, and we turn to all these which quarterback's going where, which
free agency,
yeah.
How much ayahuasca will Aaron Rodgers ingest this offseason?
A lot.
It's how much, what Call of Duty updates will come out that affects Kyler Murray's recovery.
Yeah.
You gotta love it. Kevin, how are you feeling? We're not gonna get into the Bills. I mean, we will, but just as an NFL fan, how are you feeling knowing that it's coming to an end and the offseason's right around the corner?
It's always a bittersweet time. I absolutely love the offseason because of all the reasons that Demon listed. Quarterback carousel, head coaching carousel. There's so much to get into, and we're going to be doing it all off season. So I'm ready to just party. I'm ready to just keep doing this.
This is the first time we've gone live for the Legit Football podcast. We've always gone live for 30 minutes of football. So if you're a Legit Football podcast listener only, we are live right now on YouTube. So make sure to check out the video. Anthony, as always, has prepped me and says that he's got some very juicy stats. I'm going to try to get to as many as I can, but if not, if you're watching the YouTube, you're going to see a lot of stats going off the bottom that maybe I don't mention. That's why you want to check out the video. You mentioned coaching, Kevin, and before we jump into the 2 games, and we will go deep on these games, I've got DVOA metrics, I've got PFF grades for the rosters. These matchups are about as tight as it can possibly. I mean, first of all, I think we can all agree these are the best 4 teams, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, Kevin, you have to agree there.
100%.
Yeah, so look, but before we get into that, let's talk some coaching stuff. There are at least a few of the dominoes have fallen. I'm a little surprised at this point. I feel like there's been more head coaching hires. There's really only been one. And Rich, a lot of them pertain to your team, but we're not going to start there. We're going to start with the first actual head coaching hire. Frank Reich was not unemployed for long, was hired by the Carolina Panthers. I like the move, Rich. I think it's better than trying to find like some up and coming guy that didn't work with Matt Rule. But how do you feel about Reich now going to take over in Carolina?
I love Frank Reich as a coach. I don't think he had a coaching problem in Indy. I think he had a quarterback problem. So, when you have issues like that, and plus a meddling GM can be a hindrance on a coach. But I'm interested to see what he's going to do in Carolina. I mean, that division is teed up without Brady there, unless one of these other, unless the Bucs bring in Derek Carr or something. That division's pretty much teed up for him. So they bring in a rookie quarterback. They bring in a CJ Stroud or something. They have a good offense. I mean, they have some nice offensive pieces. They lost
weapons.
Christian McCaffrey and didn't miss a beat, and they have a nice defense. So I think he can easily win that division with the shape of those other teams right now.
Yeah, and with those other teams that you reference, we got a question from Dog in the chat. What's the Bucs' future? Guys, if you're watching live, we don't have a section cut out for a Q&A, but if you have an interesting question, we'll pop it up on the screen and address it. I want to talk about this division a little bit, Kevin. We can specifically start by referencing the Bucs. The question is, what's the Bucs' future? Is Brady going to be there? Byron Leftwich is already gone. How do you think the future of this division sets up with Frank Reich taking over for the Panthers?
Well, I'll start with I definitely think, to address the Bucs part of the question, I definitely think the Bucs' future is, in one word, I'd say grim. I think the tide can turn really quick. It's the NFL, you never know if the right domino is going to fall in the right place. And sometimes things can look bleak and turn out to be great. Look at Seattle. However, I will say I foresee it getting worse before it gets better in Tampa. I don't see Brady returning. I definitely think there's going to be some turmoil. I like Todd Bowles, but I don't know if he's a great head coach, to be completely honest. I think he's a better coordinator than coach.
We'll ask Rich. Is Todd Bowles a good head coach?
Exactly.
No, he's absolutely a better coordinator.
Yeah, and so that'll be really interesting to see the dominoes as they fall in Tampa. As far as Frank Reich goes, I think it's a win for culture. Culture keeps winning in the NFL, you guys. We need to start prioritizing culture in these hirings. I feel like people continue to look at statistics. People continue to look at, scheme, and all that is super important. But Frank Reich is a leader of men, and we've seen that time and time again. We've seen the way that his players rally for him, the way that Nick Sirianni jumps on a bench screaming at Eagles fans for him. It's real. It's a real thing, and I'm very happy for Carolina to have their guy. The rest of the division, it's going to be tough. It's going to be really easy for I think Carolina to steamroll it, and Tampa. I'm sorry, I don't see a bright future at all in Tampa, to be honest.
I think this is a great landing spot for Reich.
Yeah.
Who, people were talking about him as a coach of the year candidate most of the years. Even when he had bad quarterback play, they were still competitive. I picked him to win the AFC South both of the last 2 years. I was wrong both times. One of the only things I got wrong in the playoffs. But this division was dreadful this year with Tom Brady. I think we can all agree that it's highly unlikely he's going to be back. His press conference after their playoff loss to the Cowboys certainly made it seem like he was out the door. David Morazzo in the chat says no chance TB returns to TB. I'm in agreement with that. And we actually had an article in today's Legit Football newsletter, which is free, guys. Make sure to sign up, legitfootball.com, specifically about the Bucs and how they could be cutting the starting left tackle Donovan Smith, Leonard Fournette, Cameron Brate. So we could be seeing a complete changing of the guard for a Tampa Bay team that wasn't even very good this year. I think the Panthers, at least very, very early on, could be the front runner for the NFC South. Kind of like the Falcons. Want to see what the Saints do at quarterback. It's just a good setup. Let's talk about your Jets, Rich.
Excellent.
So Mike LaFleur out. Just found out today he's not unemployed for long. He just was hired as the offensive coordinator for the Rams. And Nathaniel Hackett in, fresh off one of the worst one and done, not even one, because he didn't finish his 4 years, head coaching debuts in the history of the NFL, now gets to take over for an offense with a lot of young talent, but still a gigantic question mark at the quarterback position.
So Mike LaFleur getting hired by Sean Payton tells me a lot, because Sean Payton knows offense. And if he's going to trust Mike LaFleur with the shape that team is in to run his offense, I'm thinking maybe the Jets pulled the trigger. And they needed a fall guy. That's the reason why they got rid of Mike LaFleur.
That's exactly it right there.
I don't think he was necessarily a bad play caller. I mean, it's tough. We just talked about it with Frank Reich. It's tough to succeed if you don't have the quarterback position figured out. So is Nathaniel Hackett a good hire? I don't know. I mean, if you could bring Aaron Rodgers there, which is speculation, we don't know that Aaron Rodgers is going to say, "Oh, Nathaniel Hackett's there, so I'm definitely going to go to the Jets now."
But what do you think? What do you think? Because we have to at least address that. Because that was my first thought. Not going to lie, my first thought when Nathaniel Hackett, I'm like, he's been a play caller before. He did not call the plays in Green Bay, but he previously called plays in Jacksonville for their one good season, like 5 or 6 years ago. What is your opinion with regards to the Aaron Rodgers situation? Do you think that is some sort of a factor here?
I think if Green Bay really wants him back, he will be back in Green Bay. If they are,
I'm not sure they want him back.
That's what I'm saying. If they really wanted him back, I think he would just stay in Green Bay. That just seems like the easiest thing to do. If they don't, Woody Johnson's going to make a strong push to bring him in. So that's why I don't see Derek Carr in a Jets uniform, because they're going to have to make that decision quicker than they would the Aaron Rodgers thing. But does Nathaniel Hackett kind of move the needle a little towards him approving? I know he doesn't have a no trade clause, but he could always say, "Well, I'll retire if you trade me." Right. But does he does that move the needle a little bit more for him and make him a little more open to going to the Jets? I think so, because there's some familiarity there. Why I think with Aaron Rodgers, you're also getting probably David Bakhtiari. You might also get an Allen Lazard and a Randall Cobb to throw in there. So you'd really be getting 4 players that at positions of need, I think, or you have the door open to those 4 players. So, I think it could help a little bit. I don't think it's just a surefire move. One thing I want to ask you guys, though, this is very interesting to me, with the speculation that Rodgers can go perhaps to the Jets and Brady perhaps to Miami. Does that scare you, Kevin, at all?
Oh, I like this question.
Ooh, that's a great question. I'll be entirely honest. It definitely is a little scarier than Zach Wilson.
A little.
A little.
To be honest. Yeah,
I'm scarier than Zach Wilson in the Jets offense.
As far as Miami goes, I'm already moderately afraid of Tua. Tua gave Buffalo a run for their money and
beat him
us.
once.
So there's really no, Miami's not the little brother that it used to be. They're like the twin brother who was born like 17 minutes later than Buffalo.
I like that. I like that analogy.
Right?
I'll do that.
So no, I would say the Rodgers thing more than the Brady thing. I mean, my dream is to beat Brady in the playoffs as a Bills fan. You know, I really want to get him when it counts, and so hopefully someday that'll happen. I will say the Hackett Gambit. I want to trademark that because I think that's what we're looking at here. I think they're dangling a piece of meat for Aaron Rodgers, and if Aaron Rodgers comes, it's the smartest move ever, and they have a chance to potentially make a championship run. And if he doesn't, then you might be looking at a tanking season because I don't think Hackett by himself is much of a hire at all, to be honest. I think he's a bad play caller. Could be one of those
situations where he's a better coordinator than he is coach.
He was Buffalo's offensive coordinator back in the day, and I don't think that's true.
He coordinated with the Tyrod Taylor days, right? Correct.
Yeah. Well, he also
run pass
guy. Bortles to an AFC Championship game.
But was bad the other 2 years. It was run heavy.
Right.
He is decent at calling run offenses. I'll say that. And hey, Breece Hall coming back, Elijah Vera Tucker coming back. One thing that if you're looking for a past precedent, specifically with the Jets, this has a little bit of Brett Favre written on it. Yeah, I mean,
so then Rodgers will go to the Vikings.
Same franchises, even.
Rodgers gonna do both.
Yeah.
Just following his hero's footsteps.
Right. I'm interested to see it. I want to quickly address the Brady to Miami thing before we move on and start talking some conference games. I think, Rich, you might even have asked me somebody asked me last year my thoughts. I'm like, I don't want it, especially after the sanctions. We literally lost a first-round pick because of the tampering from Stephen Ross, who, just so we're clear, is one of the worst owners in the NFL. I can't stand that he runs my favorite team, in Sean Payton news. But as I was having a conversation with somebody in one of my dynasty leagues, shout out to the PDL, if any of you guys are listening or watching, they mentioned, well, here's the thing. If Brady does go to Miami, it almost kind of makes the sanctions like, well, at least we did get Brady in the end. I'm like, you know what? That's not a bad way to look at it. I still like Tua. I still would prefer Tua. I'd rather see us develop him. But if he's not in a position because of his health and because of, we saw how bad those concussions were this year, I think Brady schematically would be a very good fit in that McDaniel, that Shanahan-style offense where he just has to distribute the ball, get the ball accurately and decisively to Waddle, Hill. Maybe we get an upgrade at running back. That could be exciting. And if you talk about the Patriots getting Bill O'Brien, you can think what you want about O'Brien as a GM, but he was a pretty good football coach and a good play caller in his days in Houston and previously in college. AFC East could be quite a fun division to watch.
Juggernaut.
But there's no AFC East teams in the conference championship. Almost were. So let's go ahead and dive into it. As I mentioned, guys, if you're watching live, if you have questions or comments, feel free. We're live. We don't have this scripted. This is not 30 minutes of football where we're on a timer. So we can take some detours if we see something interesting come up. But we'll do the games in order. So which, by the way, just putting this out there, I get the quarterback matchups. But to me, I'm more excited for Eagles 49ers. I don't know if you guys feel the same. We haven't seen them since early 2021. That's part of it. I think roster-wise, top to bottom, they're the two best teams. Obviously, the two best quarterbacks are in the AFC. But we're going to start with the first game at 3 o'clock Eastern, 12 o'clock Pacific. Philadelphia Eagles, number 1 seed, hosting the San Francisco 49ers, number 2 seed. If you get into overall DVOA, all of these teams are like top 4 or 5. So right off the bat, no real distinction. Niners hold the biggest winning record right now in the NFL with 11 straight. Maybe it's 12 straight if you include the Cowboys. But Jalen Hurts came back, and they look like the Eagles, who were atop our power rankings for much of the year. Rich, I'll start with you on this one. Let's talk high level. Anthony's going to throw some stats at the bottom. Let's take our time. These are not easy games to pick, so I want to go through it and try to decide who we think is actually going to come out on top in this game.
You look at these two rosters, they seem pretty evenly matched. Everyone pounds the table for the 49ers defense, but that Eagles defense is no joke. And when I look at these teams and I try to pick out a weakness, the only weakness, and this is not a shot on Brock Purdy, but the only weakness I see, the only glaring, disparaging, whatever you want to call it, is the difference in talent between Brock Purdy and Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is dynamic. And the Niners, you mentioned this in the Legit Football newsletter, the Niners defense can be beat vertically. So the Philadelphia offense has the tools to do that. And if the Niners defense starts worrying about getting beat vertically, well, Jalen Hurts can take off and beat you for 15 yards. He can get those easy first downs on 3rd and 5 with his legs. Purdy, we've seen him just escape game-blowing mistakes, or what I feel could have been game-blowing mistakes. I don't know that he's going to be able to do that with the Eagles. The Cowboys offense couldn't do anything. All they really had to do was worry about CeeDee Lamb in terms of the Niners defense. So I don't know. Am I giving you a prediction now, or are we just talking?
No, let's go through it all, and then we will circle back and we will go one by one and make predictions. So we're going to talk it out. Okay. I'm already leaning one way towards both games, but I can be convinced that's how razor thin these games are.
Yeah. So that's the way I see it. The one glaring need is the one glaring issue is the quarterback position, and the fact that you can beat the Niners defense deep, and Hurts is the better quarterback. So that's what I look at when I see this.
I think those are all really great points, Demon. I wanted to jump in really quick and say David Morazzo, great friend of the show. He's been on 30 Minutes a lot, so it's great to see him in the chat. I see that he's a Niners fan, and him and I, we always have a great banter. And I'm sorry, David, but I think you're not going to be a big fan of me today.
Ooh.
I'm
just being right off the bat.
I'm just being completely honest.
Shots fired.
I mean, I have to be completely honest. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles are the buzzsaw of the NFC. Jalen Hurts is unbelievable. A.J. Brown is unbelievable. The running game has been insane. 38-7 in a divisional round is not like, that's not like a fluke. That's not like, that's a butt whooping. And I don't think the Niners are going to get their butts whooped by any stretch of the imagination because their defense is so great and they're so schematically sound. I definitely could see Kyle Shanahan catching these Philadelphia defenders off guard a little bit. But when you look at, I would say, pound for pound in terms of talent, I just think Philly has the edge. Defensive line, I definitely think Brock Purdy is going to probably have his toughest game yet, maybe possibly his worst game yet. I think that the Philadelphia defensive line is going to be in the backfield a lot. I think Darius Slay and James Bradbury are going to try their best to lock up those receivers. I mean, they're not particularly receivers who beat you deep. So I mean, Ayuk is
got to tackle as the Eagles. I mean, that's what it comes down to. You're not worried about the over the top. You're worried about yards after catch with the Niners.
And that's going to come down to whether or not Shanahan can make sure that there's enough guys on the convoy who are following Debo to the end zone. So we'll have to see. But I think I would give the Eagles offense the advantage over San Francisco's offense, and then defense. They're basically just like two of the best teams in the end. They're basically two juggernauts. That's really hard to pick.
So can I highlight a comment in the chat?
Of course.
Absolutely.
You don't have to ask permission, Rich.
I just want to.
No rules for the Legit Football Podcast. Do whatever you want.
I just wanted to address this because there was a massive difference between the butt whooping the Giants.
Read it out loud so that anybody listening on the podcast can hear.
Cowboys dog night.
Donut.
Oh, maybe there you go. Says Cowboys had a butt whooping too. But it wasn't like the way we saw Philly just control that game from the beginning and dominate the Giants. I wouldn't really call that a butt whooping. San Francisco could not get in the end zone. Brock Purdy could not get in the end zone. And this game was closer than you thought. I mean, I wasn't convinced San Francisco was going to run away with it. When I saw CeeDee Lamb come up with that big catch, I thought maybe, Dallas could break off a big play at some point. Remember, they lost Tony Pollard too. So that was, it's one of their top playmakers. So they were really, they were kind of handcuffed at that one point, and Dak just played a bad game. So I don't know that you can call the Cowboys game a butt whooping, and it probably should have been, considering what Dak did. And
Dak almost threw that game away, honestly. Yeah. And I think that highlights a lot about him, unfortunately. But that's a conversation for another day. We're looking at Niners, Eagles, and I think the biggest X factor when Philly has the ball is Jalen Hurts. And I think Demon might have highlighted this already, but you can take stuff away down the field. It won't matter. He will pick up chunk plays with his legs. He's been doing it all year. He's one of the best running quarterbacks in the league. When San Francisco has the ball, I think Christian McCaffrey is the big X factor. If they can get some misdirection going,
whose health is in question. He's going to start. We're not questioning that.
Yeah.
But he has a calf contusion, yielded carries to Elijah Mitchell at the end of that divisional round game against the Cowboys.
And that's definitely something that is not ideal, I would say, for San Francisco. But Mitchell is as good of a change of pace back as there is in the NFL. He is a battering ram, and I think it's going to be exciting if they can get both of them going a little bit. Kittle could get some stuff going. The middle of the field has been Brock Purdy's best friend. 10 to 15 yards down the field, it feels like Kittle's always kind of just finding space, and I could definitely see him doing that. Brian, I'm curious what you think in terms of DVOA. Like, bring the DVOA in. I'm ready for that part of the conversation. That's my favorite part.
I'm going to ask one more question I'd
Sure.
like to hear from you guys on before we go into the advanced metrics.
Okay.
And that's that if you just look at strength of schedule, and I used PFF for strength of schedule, these two teams actually have the two easiest schedules in the NFL. So there's a little bit of that. Are either one of them battle tested? So I want to hear from you first on this, Rich. Like, we saw the Cowboys are not an elite team, but obviously they were good. The Eagles got to play them twice. Niners got to play them and won. And when I decisively won in that, I don't think the game was ever in question for me, but it wasn't a blowout. They didn't steamroll them that they've done some other teams. How much is that a factor that these two teams haven't had the hardest of schedule? By comparison, by the way, the Bengals had the fourth hardest schedule in the league, and they're still where they're at.
I think, and again, I'll go back to the quarterback. I think because of that, when we see a rookie quarterback who's only played a handful of games, I think that would affect him way more than it would affect Jalen Hurts. We saw the Eagles without Jalen Hurts. They're a different team. I mean, this guy, people want to downplay this guy. They want to talk about his performance in the playoffs last season. He's a different player now. He's in my opinion, right there in the conversation for top 5 quarterbacks in the league. So if we're looking at that, if we're looking at they haven't been battle tested, that's going to mean trouble for Brock Purdy. And I know Niners fans don't want to hear that. I know this is a fun ride and everything, but if you were not a Niners fan, you would probably be looking at it the same way. It just seems like the logical way to look at it.
Kevin, thoughts?
Yeah, and I would love to highlight that. I think it's possible that Brock Purdy doesn't turn into a pumpkin and the 49ers still lose. That's kind of what I'm looking at. I think Philly has been winning those kinds of shootout-esque or like close-ish games that they kind of pull away from at the end. It doesn't necessarily have to be Purdy melting down. It's the NFC Championship, and Philly's was basically 14-1 before Hurts' injury, or 13-1. That's crazy. Like, I know that Brian highlighted their kind of weak schedule, but it's the NFL. You play who's in front of you, and you take out that Commanders game, and they haven't had a bad game all season.
Even that Commanders game wasn't awful. The Commanders they ran the ball over 40 times.
They came to
at
play.
at 3.5 yards a clip. It wasn't like they were dominating the Eagles. There were a few fluky turnover plays. I'm thinking of the Dallas Goedert where he had the face mask grabbed and he fumbled as a result. No call, and they turned the ball over. And they still were in it at the end of that game. So let's dive into some of the advanced metrics.
Here we go.
They're almost even across the board. So then I had to get a little bit deeper and look at individual units. So I want to talk about each unit for this. So let's start. Let's give the 49ers the ball first. Let's start with the 49ers. Best offensive lineman in the NFL. Forget just left tackle and Trent Williams. Best offensive lineman in the NFL. The rest of the offensive line plays well together, but not any particular standouts. The next closest, so Trent Williams far and away number 1 PFF graded, not even close. Mike McGlinchey 34th for tackles at right tackle, decent grade, like close to 70, but not elite by any means. Brock Purdy right around 70 PFF grades, which is fine. They don't actually need him to be more than that because of how the advantage this schematic has for the 49ers to Shanahan calling the offense. Christian McCaffrey, one of the best running backs as far as grades in the NFL. And then you've got a very, very Shanahan-specific type of skill players, with Kittle being a top 2 tight end, Debo and Ayuk excelling after the catch. So you've got the playmakers. Go to the other side of the ball. The Eagles have the best defensive line in the NFL across the board. They had 4 guys with 10 sacks or more. They led the NFL in sacks by 15. It was a historic amount of, so they're not just getting pressures, they also get to the quarterback. It'll help. Purdy's going to need to be mobile in this game. One of the best secondaries in the NFL across the board, especially with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson coming back. There was a big dip when he left. It was out for about 5 or 6 games with an injury. He came back last game against the Giants. We saw the difference there. I mentioned this on the recap show, but I want to mention it again. The difference between the Giants playing the Vikings, who have a pretty good pass rush and a dreadful secondary, versus the Giants playing the Eagles, who have an elite pass rush and a excellent secondary, is that when Daniel Jones would escape pressure against Minnesota, he'd have guys wide open. Isaiah Hodgins, Richie James, Daniel Bellinger, didn't matter. He found guys open because they couldn't cover in the second level. When he escaped pressure for the Eagles, he threw an interception to James Bradbury because those corners were on them. That is going to be crucial. The linebackers, and remember, we're Eagles defense now. I know you 49ers fans are going to start screaming. The Niners are the best linebackers. We're going to get to that.
No
but
doubt.
The Eagles also have very good linebackers. TJ Edwards, number 4 graded linebacker in PFF. They're not as balanced across the board because the Niners have, you got obviously Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Al-Shaair even is a top 20 linebacker on PFF, but they still have good linebacker play. And then, of course, you got that secondary: Darius Slay, James Bradbury, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Avonte Maddox. They're just so solid across the board. And then let's flip it. So now we're looking at the Eagles on offense and the Niners on defense. Jalen Hurts, 85.6, number 4 graded PFF quarterback. He has been an MVP caliber. Nobody can really doubt that. Rich, you mentioned it. The difference, just those games with Gardner Minshew in, which if you guys have seen our 30 Minutes of Football intro with John Chapman, hey, Gardner Minshew is a very good backup quarterback, but the drop-off was considerable. So anybody says, oh, Hurts is a system quarterback, they've got all sorts of weapons, they got the best offensive line in the game. We saw a dramatic drop in production with him out, and he says he's injured, but he did not look injured to me last week against the Giants. So then you've got, let's talk about that best offensive line. You've got 3 at least Pro Bowl caliber, if not 2 all-pro caliber offensive linemen, and Jason Kelce at center, Lane Johnson at right tackle, Jordan Mailata at left tackle, and then you have Samola, who is a top 8 guard, and Landon Dickerson, who's a top 20 guard.
That's not even fair.
There's no weaknesses. It's
That's
insane.
not even fair.
You got A.J. Brown at wide receiver. You've got Devontae Smith. A.J. Brown with an 87.7 grade on the season. Devontae Smith with 81.1. Dallas Goedert, top 4 tight end. So Kittle might be better, but it's not a leap and bound. The receivers, I think we're definitely going to give the edge to Philadelphia here. Go on the other side of the ball. I think one of the differences here is Philadelphia is got studs all over the place. The Niners have, when they have a stud, it's like the best stud in the game. So you have Trent Williams on the offensive side, Nick Bosa, who I think should be defensive player of the year on the defensive side. But the rest of their defensive line, while they play good, and this D'Amico Ryan's defense is so good and coached so well, they don't have as much talent across the board as the Eagles do. But still, I'd probably put them at number 2 or number 3 defensive line in the NFL.
Definitely.
Especially with Bosa, 91 grade, the number 3 edge rusher. But he's the defensive player of the year. Linebacker, that's one of the biggest advantages you have, is they have far and away the best linebacker crew in the NFL. And that is crucial because not only are they great at tackling, they're insanely good at coverage. Fred Warner, we saw him covering CeeDee Lamb in the slot and making a defensive play down the field in the seam. So that will help when it comes to spying Hurts when he gets out of the pocket. That will help when it comes to shutting down the middle of the field, especially with Goddard on some of those in-breaking routes. And Charvarius Ward, top 10 cornerback. Fantastic. Lenoir has played much better in the playoffs, but he has been a bit of a liability for most of the season. And then they have very good safety play. Jimmy Ward is playing in the nickel right now. Tashawn Gibson, like a top 30 safety. And Hufanga, who is a Pro Bowler, his PFF grade actually is only 71, but he's a playmaker. He's a guy that, he'll come up with the plays you need each game. All right, I've broken it all down. I'm not going to give my opinions. I just wanted to break down unit by unit. Kevin, we'll start with you on this one. How does that help look at kind of this matchup?
One thing I want to highlight that you brought up, And just a fantastic job, Brian. Appreciate all that. That's like, oh, like I'm a
He's the
football
best.
nerd. That's like you're just tickling my fancy with that stuff, man. I'll tell
Quickly,
you what.
yeah, quick correction. Yeah, Hufanga made all pro, not just Pro Bowl. Thank you, David. Go ahead.
Hofunga is an animal, and he's so fun to watch, and he's definitely an X factor that could help over the top for sure. I will say that I think that the big thing that San Francisco can do is, I think you mentioned it, the amount of pressure that they've been putting on the quarterbacks all year. They're going to have to get the ball out quick, and they're going to have to use misdirections and potentially take advantage of Philadelphia's aggressiveness. So if they can throw at the
Which
rush,
is Shanahan's specialty. Let's be clear here.
exactly what I'm
Misdirection and
thinking.
scheming his people open and understanding how to create space for his playmakers. That's Shanahan, 101.
There's going to be convoys. We're going to see a potential Deebo Samuel running free. It just happens, and I'm very excited to see if they can do enough. That's the issue, because on the other side of the ball, I think what's going to happen is Demon highlighted it early, and I think it's the key to the game. Philadelphia has the ultimate rock, paper, scissors beater in Jalen Hurts. You throw rock, it does not matter, because even if he's already started to throw scissors, he can change it at the last minute to paper. That's what Philadelphia has in Hurts, and that's what they have in their weapons. I think the only area that Philadelphia is inferior on the offensive side of the ball is, I think their running backs are a little bit weaker, but Miles Sanders is a perfectly, I would say, good to great NFL running back. We saw Gainwell go for 100 yards last week. Boston Scott, I don't really see him making much of an impact in this game, but they got some guys. That's the big difference, I think.
One of the things that really jumps off the page to me as Brian was going through all that is, we've talked about before how a great defensive line can really mask a weak secondary, putting pressure on the quarterback, forcing him into mistakes. But with Philadelphia, you have a world-class defensive line and a great secondary. So when you combine those two, with a rookie quarterback who has a tendency to run backwards and to the left when he gets into trouble, those errors that he almost made against Seattle, those errors that he almost made against Dallas, I think.
Well, he did make the errors; they just didn't come back to haunt him.
Yeah, and I think those will come back to haunt him against Philadelphia, because they just have playmakers all over the place. On the other side of the ball, Kyle Shanahan is. I don't know that Nick Sirianni is a good coach. He has a fantastic roster. I don't know that he's a good coach. I think maybe the arrow would be pointing to perhaps him not being such a good coach, because we saw what the team looked like with Gardner Minshew. They don't look like the same team. So this wasn't, a world-class quarterback. Let's take Buffalo, for example. Buffalo allowed Josh Allen. You see them stumble. You're like, oh, okay, all right, they'd stumble. He's Superman on that team. But, with how talented this roster is, for them to lose games without Jalen Hurts there, I think that makes you look at Nick Sirianni and say, is he really that good of a coach, or is this, is he just lucky to have the guys that he has? So, Jalen Hurts, man, we can talk about guys spying him. He can lure the linebackers in, open up the middle of the field if he wants to. Even if he doesn't have to run for 30 yards, he doesn't have to pull Lamar Jackson, and he all he needs is 3-4 yards, get to the next down, and then he can complete a pass. You can beat San Francisco outside the hash marks too, not only vertically. So I just think when we look at this and the deeper we delve into it, Kelsey and Johnson have given up one sack between them over the past 2 years. One sack between them.
2 years.
That's crazy. 2 years. Yeah. So the more we peel back the layers, the more and more I think I'm looking at Philly saying maybe it'll be a close game, but I don't know that San Francisco would need a lot to go in their favor for this to turn to come out on the winning end of this.
It's so hard to pick. Rich is tongue-tied. He's confused. I want to throw out one more interesting DVOA nugget. Kevin, you mentioned the game last week and how the Niners had struggled in the red zone. So if you look at all of the breakdowns for DVOA for the whole season for both of these teams, it's top 10, even top 5 for almost all of the metrics. We're talking offense, defense, red zone offense, red zone defense. The only one that isn't is San Francisco, 21st in red zone offense. Now that's for the whole season. I did not do these based on, a lot of I've been doing since week 13. This is for the whole season, so you have to take into account the start of the year. But still, even with Purdy starting, the final, 9 games of the regular season, or playing in the regular 9 games, 21st in red zone offense. We saw that last week. So if you're talking about one of the keys to a Niners victory, it has to be when you get that close. And I do think they'll be able to move the ball. They've got a great running game. They've got an amazing play caller. I don't think Purdy will be scared by the moment. I think we would have seen that by now. He does make a mistake or two a game, Rich, but it's not like he's making 7 or 8. Yes, they haven't come back to haunt him, but I do think they'll move the ball. But can they punch it in when they get there? Can they turn 3 into 7? That's going to be the difference. This game is so razor thin. I just see it as who catches a potential pick. If there's a ball that hits the ground, what way does it bounce? It could be that simple. So we're looking for these small,
Definitely.
razor thin margins when we're deciding to pick this game. And that's the only one that really stood out to me from an overall team perspective. We went through all the PFF grades, is that the fact that the Niners, if they have a weakness on offense, even with Purdy in there, it has been that they haven't been so great at converting in the red zone. All right, I'm ready to pick.
Let's do it.
Rich, we'll start with you. We've given all the metrics. Hey, Takedo's here. Takedo Luna, always nice. Rich,
He wants
say
me to
his
say
name.
Brock Purdy's name the way Paul Heyman does. I can't do Paul Heyman justice, so I'm not even going to attempt it.
Yeah,
But,
sometimes you
Brock Purdy! How was that?
that sounded good to me.
I
Okay.
needed that. I needed that.
I like it. Rich, we'll start with you. You have to make your entire pick in the Paul Heyman voice. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, God. The fact that San Francisco, you just pointed out that stat about them having trouble getting in the end zone, the fact that they couldn't get in the end zone against the Cowboys. I'm not saying Philadelphia is not going to have trouble getting in the end zone, but I don't think anybody expects Philadelphia not to reach the end zone at least once or twice. This defense is better than Dallas's defense. The offense is better than Dallas's offense. That having trouble getting into the end zone, I think, is going to be what decides this game ultimately. So I'm going Philadelphia.
Yeah,
That's you, Kevin. Just go. Go.
I'm happy to do it. Yeah, I would like to highlight that I said early on, David and I, we've been bonding in the 30 minutes chat for a long time. I hope he can forgive me. I also have to take Philadelphia. There's just too much, like I said, buzzsaw effect. Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, that defense. I just see it being too much. I don't think this is going to be a game where the 49ers come up small. I think they're going to meet the moment like Brian suggested. I think Purdy is absolutely cut from the right cloth. That poise, I think it's going to show up. And I think what Demon has been highlighting, the moments of panic, I think we'll get a couple. I don't think he's going to lose the game for them. I think it's going to be really close. But I have Philadelphia winning and covering. And everybody in the chat who was propping up the 49ers, you have to come back when Philly wins next week and tell us we were right. And I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
So I've been teasing around looking at this matchup.
Brian, if you take the 49ers, I am going to call you a 9. You have to hand in your Dolphins fandom card.
Let me make my pick first before you just automatically assume.
Thank you, Anthony.
Tell us we were right, quote Kevin. By the way, once again, if you're only listening to this on the podcast, you have to check out YouTube because we've been giving so much advanced stats and talking between the three of us that there were at least 5 or 6 gem nugget stats that Anthony put on the bottom and I just didn't get to. Yeah. So make sure you watch the YouTube videos so you can see those. And Anthony getting all frisky and putting Kevin's quotes in the chat.
I love it.
And you get to see our faces, and it's an honor to be the third best looking guy in this room.
Oh, stop it. That's me.
He's got the long hair. I mean, he's got the SoCal, Southern California look. But yeah, diving into this, it's I'm looking for these. Okay, as good you think about the teams that have played the Eagles well this year. They always find the whatever way they need to win. If they needed to pass the ball for 350 yards, they've done that. If they've needed to run the ball for 200 plus yards, which they did last week against the Giants, they've done that. If they need an AJ Brown game, he steps up. If they need a Devontae Smith game, Dallas Goedert, they just find different ways to win. It's been so hard to find. Like if you do this, they'll be slowed down. No, if you stop their running game, they can go deep on you. They can pass across the middle. They can get yards after the catch. Maybe not to the degree of the Niners receivers, but A.J. Brown is not an easy guy to bring down. Devontae Smith is one of the best route runners in the NFL. And Hurts, X factor if his shoulder is an issue. It did not look like an issue last week, but that's something to keep in mind. On the other side of the ball, McCaffrey has to be healthy and perfect. You need Kittle like making circus catches like he did last week. You need Fred Warner coming up with some insane interception, which all of these guys are fully capable of. You need Trent Williams to completely lock down that left side of the offensive line to this amazing Eagles pass rush, which he's very capable of. But it seems like the Niners need to play at their absolute best, and the Eagles, they really just need Jalen Hurts to not revert to old Jalen Hurts and play like he has all season. So it just seems like that margin of error is slightly better for the Eagles. And add into the fact that they're at home, and add into the fact that, oh, and by the way, let's say coaching. Sirianni, you mentioned, I'm not as down on Sirianni as they used to be, but Kyle Shanahan is maybe the best head coach, certainly the best play caller in the NFL. But they're playing at the Link. This place is going to be going absolutely nuts. Playing in Philadelphia, the weather won't be a factor because it's going to be like 50 degrees, but that place is going to be rocking. The Niners have only played home playoff games at this point. I have to go Philadelphia, and it's a coin toss game. I think it could go either way. It could be, like I mentioned earlier, who catches a pick versus who drops a pick. Which way does the oblong ball bounce? It could be that clear, but this is not a Brock Purdy indemnification. I do think he's big enough for the moment, but there's a clear, like, I'm picking Hurts. If I have to pick one of these two quarterbacks to win me a conference championship game and put me in the Super Bowl, it's Hurts. So sorry, Niners fans. I'm going to be on 49ers Rush later today.
John Chapman's kicking you off that podcast.
Yeah, but he brings me on because he knows I'm objective and I bring my view. But I think this game comes down. I'm picking Hurts. Brian, like, I love Anthony's never done this before. He's putting quotes at the bottom. I love it, Anthony.
Spicy.
He's gone rogue, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, I'm going to go Philadelphia by the slightest of margins. I'm not betting either of these games. I was more willing to bet the next game. And let's go ahead and jump into that. Let's talk about the AFC Championship game at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific. The number 1 Kansas City Chiefs hosting the number 3 Cincinnati Bengals. But, I mean, they probably would have been number 2 if they played that game earlier. Just how that game started and how the division championship. So, still, we all agreed already they're the best 4 teams. DVOA, same thing. If you're just looking at overall DVOA, they're for the whole season, so not even recently, the whole season they're 4-5. I mean, these guys razor thin, 23.3% to 22.1 overall DVOA. You can't find a difference there. Kevin, we'll start with you on this one because the Bengals did beat your Bills. Let's break down Mahomes versus Joe Burrow. Oh, I will mention one last thing. This was much easier for me to pick before Patrick Mahomes magically decided that he doesn't have a limp after a high ankle sprain. Nothing but full practices. I don't know if you guys saw any video, the press conference where him stepping off the stage and then actually he looks like he doesn't have an injury. I don't get it. Kevin, talk to me.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, the amount of hullabaloo surrounding the Mahomes ankle injury. And I have to admit, I'm the first one who bought into the Chiefs dip. I definitely didn't have as much confidence. I will say that what I was saying about Philly, I think also applies to Cincinnati.
Picked him to miss the playoffs, but I don't keep mentioning that. He thought the Chiefs weren't even going to be here.
Yeah, you got to rub that one in.
Of course.
Let's just continue what you were saying, Kevin.
You got to run that tape back every week. No, I have to be honest. Cincinnati has the buzzsaw effect that I think Philadelphia has. What we saw last week was not 2 great teams duking it out. Not to say Buffalo's not a great team, but we saw one team handling another team. We saw a bully on the schoolyard who took your toy and held it away from you and put their other hand on your face and said, "You can't get the toy. I'm sorry." And that's just where Cincinnati is at right now as far as how they're gelling.
That sounds like a traumatic event from your childhood, Kevin.
It's both.
He's reliving it.
It was traumatic then and it's traumatic now.
Okay.
But I think we're looking at trench play from Cincinnati that is maybe the best we've seen from any team all year, along with the 49ers in Philadelphia. And I think that we're looking at the ultimate, will Joe Burrow continue this stretch of playing Joe Cool football and getting the ball out in less than 2.5 seconds and completing the passes he's supposed to complete and checking to the run plays when the box is light. They're playing so fundamentally sound and they're so well coached and they're such a well-oiled machine. Cincinnati is a terrifying prospect. On the other side of the ball, you have the ultimate finesse master. You have the magician himself, Patrick Mahomes, who's doing it with one of the most average group of supporting receivers that I've ever seen in my life. Travis Kelce's unbelievable, and he counts. We've talked about sport. He counts as 2 wide receiver ones, no doubt. Jerick McKinnon's been fantastic. Juju's all right. Juju's a good slot guy. He can get open. I think this game's going to come down to the defenses and what they're able to do to limit these offenses. And right now, Cincinnati's defense is just hotter. I don't think they're better, but they're hotter.
Yeah, pointing at the defenses, I'm gonna go along and piggyback on what Kevin was saying. The way the Chiefs can attack the Bengals is through the interior of the offensive line, because the Bengals offense is banged up.
Going to be missing 3 starters again, right, in all likelihood. And their center, Ted Karras, was injured in that game against Buffalo. He didn't come out, but he was not 100%.
So they have 1.5 offensive linemen.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. Didn't matter last week. Let's be clear. Did not matter against Buffalo.
So on offense, even with Patrick Mahomes, let's not pretend he's not a good pocket passer. I mean, he is a good pocket passer. He can play from the pocket.
He's a good everywhere passer.
Yeah, if he has to. So, him being, kind of stuck in the pocket, that doesn't, I don't think that takes much away from him. He does have this tendency to extend plays if he has to. So, that just adds to what he can already do. And that makes him even more dangerous. But if he can't do that, I don't think that takes so much away from him. And Isaiah Pacheco is really coming alive in that running game. They haven't had that running back that can be that explosive. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the plotter. Joe Coolman. Sorry, we have to highlight this. David Marazzo.
I had to put that out there. So, Rich, you can read it because you were talking.
David Marazzo said, "Joe Cool my ass. LOL. Win something first, young man." Well,
had to put that up.
Look, this is probably. I don't think David cares about the Chiefs, so he's not going to get mad at anything I say. When I look at Cincinnati, the Cincinnati side of the ball, their defense, Lou Anarumo, I think that's how you say his name.
Yeah, we're going to call him Captain Lou.
Yeah, Captain Lou is phenomenal at making halftime adjustments, and he's done it against these Chiefs with a Patrick Mahomes who hasn't been hobbled. He's been able to do it. He is one of the best defensive play callers in the league, and he's doing it with like a scrap heap of NFL players that other teams didn't want. I don't see how that would change. When I look at that and I look at the way Joe Burrow is so good under pressure, how accurate he is, how quickly he can release the ball and the weapons around him, man, this is maybe a lofty comparison, but this reminds me of the Patriot dynasty when they just had that defense that could make adjustments and the quarterback that can get rid of the ball and be accurate when you needed to and just chip away. So that's tough, man. That's a tough team to beat.
Mm-hmm. On the Lou Anarumo thing, I saw an amazing breakdown on Twitter. It was on YouTube from Ben, I forget his last, Ben Solak from The Ringer, where he broke down just how good Anarumo is, specifically against elite quarterbacks. Like, he changes his game plan. And actually, that's another thing to note. They don't really have a base defense. They change it every single game. Even Mahomes said, every time I played the Bengals, they played a completely different defense against me. And it's because Anarumo is so good at either scheming ahead of time or, as Rich, you mentioned, making a change at halftime. And that's one of the reasons we've seen them dominate the Chiefs. The Chiefs have not beat the Bengals. Mahomes has not beat Burrow yet. They've all been close. It has not been blowouts. That's worth considering. But this defense has been, and they're kind of unheralded a little bit. They're number 9 in DVOA, overall defense on the season. Cincinnati is, versus KC, who's the number 1 offense. So that is definitely something to watch. Not a lot. KC's defense is 18th overall and 25th in the red zone, 26th in the red zone. But where Bills didn't have any type of pass rush last week against that 1.5 offensive linemen, as Kevin so eloquently put it, the Chiefs are second in the NFL in sacks. Now, a big difference between them and the Eagles, but they're still second in the NFL in sacks. And the Bills don't have anyone like Chris Jones coming up the middle. Frank Clark, Karlaftis, the rookie, has really played well towards the second half of the season. This is a much better pass rush than the Bengals have faced really since they played the Chiefs earlier in the year. And without Von Miller, the Bills we already talked, they are like one of the bottom 4 or 5 pass rushes.
Just to add to that, also, that game being in the snow, it's tougher for defensive linemen to get that initial burst.
From what I've seen, it will be below freezing temperatures, but I don't think there's any precipitation. That could change, of course, but it looks like that will not be an issue. It'll be cold, but that doesn't matter. Both of these teams are used to playing in the cold weather. Let's talk a little bit about PFF, kind of looking at, the quarterbacks are even if Mahomes has that mobility. That is actually, he's an amazing pocket passer. However, he is the number one graded PFF quarterback on the run and off-platform plays. You cannot deny, as great as a quarterback he is, no matter where he is, that this is a gigantic part of his game. And if he's not as mobile, I was also watching earlier today, a clip of him in the Super Bowl against the Bucs, which the Chiefs lost. But I don't think we really gave him enough credit about how superhuman he played in that game. And he just had drop after drop. Tyreek Hill dropping a touchdown. Travis Kelce dropping a surefire first down. Marquez Valdez, or not Scanlon, McCole Hardman. They just drop after drop. That game could have been different as well as the Bucs played. Mahomes was just otherworldly. But if just taking that away doesn't mean they should roll over, but that's huge. I want to see, is he really full strength? Could he really have Wolverine healed himself from a high ankle sprain in 1 week? Let's have that discussion while I bring up some of these PFFs.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I think the escapability is superhuman. And yeah, I'll never forget some of those highlights in the Super Bowl against the Bucs where he's juking people out. He's spinning. He's running 20, 30 yards back, finding guys. He's unreal. And I know it as well as anybody, having watched him send my favorite team home the last 2 years prior to this one. So, he's definitely one of those special guys in terms of maneuverability of the pocket and escapability. I think if his skill to do that is diminished at all, I think Andy Reid is competent enough to adjust the game plan accordingly to where those won't be the plays that he needs to.
Or I think he said something like, his quote was, "We have 300 plus plays with Mahomes in the pocket." So
I think them knowing that he might be hobbled is a huge advantage. I think that you'll see so many jet sweeps, the eye candy guy running across the middle. I think we'll see that a lot. I think we'll see a lot of the guys running in the backfield. Now he's running the out route behind the quarterback. There's going to be so much of that because they're the Chiefs. There would be so much of that anyway. But I think that brings a whole nother layer to the magic show that I talked about earlier. I think that's kind of what we're looking at here, a situation where the magic show is going to be on full display. And adjusting the game plan accordingly to a hobbled Mahomes means more Pacheco, more McKinnon. A name that I'd like to throw out there that's just somehow seems to make a play every single week, even though nobody knows who he is, Noah Gray. Look for a handful of those underhand shovel passes to Noah Gray.
On that same thing, I think they're going to run a lot more 12 and 13 personnel. I think you're going to see extra tight ends in there.
Odie Fortson.
Because they all have the ability, Kelce is otherworldly, to make plays in the pass game as well as just adding extra protection and extra blockers in there, knowing that Mahomes is not 100%.
Absolutely.
And I don't know. I mean, to me, it seems like if Mahomes can't go off script, that might even be a better scenario for Kansas City to chip away at short yardage and, not have to rely on that big play if he just sees things working and gets into a rhythm. And, for some reason, Cincinnati can't adjust to that because, that I think what Brian pointed out before is the drops. These wide receivers dropping the ball like that is an X factor where we know Mahomes will put the ball there, but are they going to be able to convert that into something and turn that into something?
That's a great point.
I think they need to run the ball. I think they need to control the clock. Pacheco has gotten better and better each week. He was averaging like 7 or 8 yards a carry last week, and they still didn't use him that much. They gave McKinnon like 11 carries, and McKinnon's been fantastic as a pass catcher. But when you got Pacheco, he basically, that drive where Henne came in, which they scored 98 yards. Good job, Chad Henne. But that was an Isaiah Pacheco drive. Like, he drove that. Yes, Henne got the touchdown pass to Kelce. They need to do more of that in order to take the pressure off Mahomes, create opportunities in play action, and keep Joe Burrow off the field.
I like what Demon had to say because when you talk about those big plays and when you're hunting big plays, there's diminishing returns. And I know that as well as anybody. It's awesome when you can hit those deep balls, but they're lower percentage. The Chiefs are going to be running similar to what Burrow ran last week and what Burrow's been doing all year. They're going to be running a high percentage offense because there's a less likelihood that Mahomes is going to be, sprinting full speed towards the sidelines, uncorking 170 yards down the field. I just don't see that happening in this game. Not to say he can't. I just don't see that happening in this game given his health. So that could be the best possible thing for them against this aggressive and scrappy Bengals defense. Trey Hendrickson, Sam Hubbard, DJ Reader, BJ Hill, they've been living in offensive backfields, but not if Mahomes gets the ball out in under 2 seconds. There's no way. And they got some guys, McKinnon and Kelsey, who can hurt you if you get the ball out quick. That's pretty exciting. That's pretty interesting as far as a formula for the Chiefs to create something.
Yeah, I highlighted in the chat Knightson H with a really creepy Smurf avatar. It is terrifying yet fascinating at the same time. Mahomes already running on that foot. I mentioned it, but I wanted to highlight that. I don't understand how that's happening. If he's playing at even 80% and he has at least some scrambling ability, that's such an X factor.
For the people on the podcast, the people listening, that is Zombie Smurf.
Oh, a zombie Smurf. There is such a thing as?
No, I don't know. He looks like a zombie.
I was ready to believe it. You should have said yes. You don't know.
There should be a zombie Smurf.
There should be. There absolutely should be. Let's dive a little bit into the units and the PFF grades. We're going to start with Kansas City on offense and the Bengals on defense because I think that's the X factor here, right, guys? Lou Anarumo and that defense, which is interesting. When we dive into some of these PFF grades, not a lot of individual, like nobody above 80 except Trey Hendrickson. That's a credit to Anarumo and the schemes he does. So we have to keep that in mind. Even looking at these individual grades, that they're better than the sum of their parts on defense. They lost Awuzie, their top cornerback, earlier in the year for the season. Hasn't really seemed to slow them down. But let's start with the Chiefs' offense. Actually, a top 5, maybe top 3 offensive line. Believe it or not, you got Orlando Brown Jr. on the left side, 75.8, 17th best tackle. Joe Thuney, 6th best guard in the league. The only center with a better rating than Jason Kelsey is Creed Humphrey with a nearly 90-point grade. Fantastic center. Trey Smith, 11th best guard. And their one weakness is Wiley at right tackle with a 62 grade. But like I said, if you mentioned Noah Gray, if they can bring more 12 and 13 personnel, Kelsey does a lot of blocking before he goes out. One of the touchdowns he scored last week, he started with a chip block and then kind of rolled out, turned around in the red zone, was wide open for a touchdown. They can do a lot of that to help their right tackle. Smith-Schuster is their highest graded wide receiver at a 70, 44th best amongst receivers.
Yikes.
They have McKinnon in here as the lead back at 61. Be curious to see what Pacheco's is. Kelsey, though, 91.4 top. I mean, he's such a difference maker. Everybody knew he was getting the ball last week. Didn't matter. Caught the ball 14 times for 98 yards and 2 touchdowns. Trey Hendrickson is going to be a big factor in this if he can get pressure on Mahomes, especially because Mahomes, even if he is miraculously healed, he's not going to be as escapable. He's not going to be able to use that. So there's a better chance. And Mahomes has some sort of record, like every time he scrambles, he doesn't get sacked. It's something like some sort of long streak. Anthony, if you have that, I'd love to see it, about consecutive scrambles without getting sacked. Maybe he lost it last week. So just the fact that he's not as escapable, if you do get pressure on him and he does his little Houdini act, maybe Hendrickson can finish the job and get a sack. And Sam Hubbard on the other side, 70, 46th at edge. They do have good linebackers, Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt. Jermaine Pratt actually is a 9th best linebacker in the NFL at a 79.7 grade. That can help. They may not have to spy Mahomes as much because they know they can use those receivers more in coverage. Anarumo has been known to drop 8 specifically against Mahomes and just rush 3, knowing that, hey, we're just going to flood the areas, make him hold the ball a little bit longer, and especially if he doesn't have that escapability. So I think we'll see that again. I don't think we'll see a lot of blitzing. I think they'll just make it so that he has to hold the ball longer, and he can't just run around like old Mahomes because he's not going to be 100%. In the secondary, Mike Hilton, 17th, and he's their slot guy. He played a great game last game against the Bills, but that was really as a pass rusher. You're kind of bringing in that cornerback blitz. But Eli Apple, 105th. But even he's made plays in the playoffs. See what I mean? It's almost hard to judge this. So just looking at this on paper, clear advantage to KC, but we've seen what this defense can do playing together. Let's jump to the other side of the ball with the Bengals on offense and the Chiefs on defense. This offensive line looks dreadful if you're just looking at the PFF grades. Everything in the 50s except Ted Karras, who is 64.6, and we mentioned that he is not 100%. 55, 52, 50, and 51. Didn't matter last week for whatever reason. We can call it the snow. We can call it the Bills pass rush. I don't think that there's no way they can duplicate that. They may not be a disaster, like 9 sacks against the Titans last year, disaster, but they're not going to be as good as against the Bills. Chris Jones is going to get pressure. You can guarantee that as long as he doesn't get injured early in that game. Burrow and Mahomes are the top 2 in the NFL and PFF grades. They're almost identical. Mixon, 81, so advantage there in the running back room. But like I said, Pacheco has looked really good if they can get him going. But here's the big X factor. I mean, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, even Hayden Hurst, who is 65. Like, he's run-of-the-mill, but he makes plays, especially when all the other guys are covered. And the Chiefs don't have the secondary. They're starting multiple rookies or second-year players. You've got Jalen Watson, who had that amazing interception last week, and McDuffie, and the cornerback position, 23rd. Javarius Sneed, actually 78.2. Nick Bolton, been a fantastic linebacker, but not a lot behind him. Willie Gay's been good. But Chris Jones, number 1 interior defensive lineman, 92.1 grade. So you need him to do something. You need Jones to single-handedly be a disruptor. Steve Spagnuolo, fantastic defensive coordinator. We could see some stuff schemed up from him. But just like the other side, clear advantage of Bengals offense versus Chiefs defense, Rich.
Yeah, that's, T. Higgins is a matchup nightmare. So even if Joe Burrow does feel pressure right away, he can just chuck up a high pass and T. Higgins will come down with it, especially against a young secondary like that. And then there's another thing is when we saw, not to bring up that Bills loss from last year in the playoffs, but, when Patrick
Not
Mahomes,
to bring it up, but I'm going to bring it up.
Not to rub salt in the wound, but
when Patrick Mahomes needed the big play, he had Tyreek there who can just stretch the field and make that big play. Burrow has that in Chase. Mahomes doesn't have that. So he's going to have to rely on Kelsey. And with a guy like Lou, Captain Lou, we'll call him, right?
Captain Lou.
Knowing that's coming, this isn't the first time he's seen this team. This isn't the first time he's dealt with these guys. So I don't know that that's going to be such a tall order for him to say, we're going to shut that down and see if you can beat us another way. Are we doing predictions now, or are we just still talking?
One more round, and then I'm going to go around. So,
right.
Kevin, final thoughts,
Kevin.
Yeah. So I would say, based on everything I just heard, I think the big thing for the Chiefs is going to be to find Eli Apple and target Eli Apple. 105th is not going to cut it. I've always said that I love when teams with championship droughts win championships. So there is that the Bengals have that going for them. But also, if the Bengals lose, it means Eli Apple is sad, and that would make me happy. So let's see.
Your Bills bias is showing.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you can go after him on Twitter.
I'm so excited for that. I got the receipts. But no, it'll be really, really interesting to see how that Apple is.
Anthony with the target Eli Apple quote. We can't say anything right now with Anthony putting it on
T-shirts. By the way, we got to put these on T-shirts.
Yes,
he's the big liability. Unfortunately, Kansas City, I wouldn't say they have a bunch of Eli Apples because I don't think anybody on their defense is that bad, but they do have more holes than Cincinnati, and they also have the quarterback with the high ankle sprain. So that's kind of an iffy situation. That's kind of what is like giving me my pause with, because I definitely think Cincinnati's going to get theirs. I don't see a world where they score less than 24 points. I know that's maybe a little lofty, but I see it happening. I see 24 to 28 points pretty easily from Cincinnati. Kansas City.
I do from the Chiefs too, for what it's worth. It's like I don't see either of these teams scoring less than 24
I do
points.
Too. But like I said, I think the defense and the ankle are just big enough red flags or causes for concern that I would feel safer saying that I think Kansas City will score 21 to 24 points. I just think their floor is a little lower, and I don't think they have the ability to limit. I think it's going to be harder to keep Cincinnati from their ceiling. So those are the kind of the big variables that I'm weighing when I make my prediction.
Well, let's start with you on this one since we started on Rich last time. Let's go ahead and make your official pick. Then we'll go to Rich and I'll make my pick and wrap it up. Absolutely.
It pains me to say it, but I have to pick Cincinnati to win. And if they're currently dogs, because that line has been moving around like.
So it's last I saw it's 1 for the Chiefs, so it's -1. But generally, you'll give 2 or sometimes even 2.5 to the home team. So the fact that the Chiefs are only favored by 1 at home says Vegas thinks the Bengals are a better team.
Yeah, I think that's a good call, and I think Mahomes' health has a lot to do with it. I can't, in good conscience, pick against the buzzsaw Bengals, and I'm predicting a buzzsaw Super Bowl. I'm predicting Eagles Bengals in the Super Bowl, and that's going to be one of the most exciting matchups that we've had in a very long time. Um, I hope I'm wrong because, like I said, Eli Apple being sad would make me happy. But other than that, I don't see a world where it's not Bengals Eagles.
Yeah, these quarterbacks are 1 and 2 in my book in terms of quarterback rankings. And when you take Patrick Mahomes and you hobble him a little bit, he becomes number 2, and Joe Burrow becomes number 1. And it doesn't take that much away from him. But I look at the receivers. Cincinnati's receivers are far and away better. And when the quarterback situation is that close and you're giving that much of an edge to a guy like Joe Burrow, that says a lot to me. And also, again, with the defense, we've seen this defense Cincinnati's defense just come alive in the fourth quarter and just shut people down. So if it's a close game in the fourth quarter, knowing those adjustments are coming, it's tough to look at this and say Cincinnati's not going to win. I don't know that they'll steamroll them, but let me tell you, I wouldn't be shocked if Cincinnati firmly controlled this game right after halftime. They just came out and just took it, and Kansas City didn't have an answer at that point. So, yeah, I think we're going to see a Cincinnati Eagles Super Bowl. Again, Cincinnati, to me, this team looks like that Patriots team from back in the day. The one with you have Belichick calling the plays. That's a problem. You have Brady with his accuracy, and he's just so cool under pressure. That's what I see. I'm not going to give you a Super Bowl winner prediction, but
we'll do that next week.
That's what I see going into the Super Bowl.
Or maybe even the week after. We'll see, because there'll be a 2-week break. I don't think Arrowhead makes a difference in this, unlike Philadelphia. As great as Purdy has been, going into the link for his first playoff game is going to, and those Philly fans are just insane. And KC fans have what loudest stadium ever fine. I don't think that matters to Burrow in the slightest. He's beaten him in Arrowhead. He beat him in Arrowhead last year in this exact spot. Yeah. So it makes so much sense to pick Cincy. It would be harder if Mahomes was 100%, but it's like everything lines up to pick the Bengals in this. They're the better football team top to bottom. Their defense is playing better, especially with Captain Lou making the adjustments. But the Chiefs do have Andy Reid, and I just watched all these highlights about how the reason Mahomes lost in that Super Bowl is not because of Mahomes' effort. Granted, he was 100% healthy. He was running all over. I think we said it. He had like 400 yards behind the line of scrimmage in that Super Bowl. That's a real stat. I think it was 395.
That was insane.
But we can't align on everything. My heart says Bengals, but I'm going to officially pick the Kansas City Chiefs.
Wow.
Because I also want to see that for a few reasons. I just love watching Mahomes play, and I have all the respect in the world for Burrow. I agree, Rich. 1 and 2, maybe they're flip-flop with the injury, and I think Burrow's going to be here for a long time. But I want to see Mahomes get the Super Bowl again. He's only won 1, and people are going to start to question his legacy, which is insane that they would do that. They were questioning him last year. Some guy named Pro Football Demon picked them not even to make the playoffs this year. I mean, what the
Demon? Aaron Rodgers, future Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers, has had the same problem, and he's doing just fine.
That's true. Okay, maybe he can get to the Super Bowl one more time with the Jets. We'll have to see about that. But yeah, I've been listening to the New Heights podcast, which I highly recommend. If anybody who's listening, watching, or even Rich and Kevin, it's the Kelsey brothers. It's Jason and Travis. They have a podcast once a week. They talk about their games. They preview their upcoming games. They're hilarious. They do a phenomenal job. And the fact that I've been able to listen to them throughout their playoff run, and they both had number 1 seeds and buys, and it's just I want a New Heights podcast with the Eagles and the Chiefs in the Super Bowl.
Unreal.
So I am going to officially pick Kansas City. I'm not betting either of these. I want to bring up, David mentioned earlier, PFF grades are fun, but using them for gambling purposes can be foolhardy. I'm not betting either of these games, just so we're clear. I did bet the 3-leg parlay last week and got it right. I didn't bet the Cincy Bills game because it was hard for me to pick that one, but I got the other 3 ones right. I'm not touching this in betting. I'm just going to sit back, enjoy it, and just watch these 2 amazing games with these 4 best teams in the NFL. But my heart is going to stick with the Chiefs. And because we can't all align on these 2 games, 6 picks exactly the same, so we can revisit next week. Any last thoughts? Let's wrap it up. This has been an awesome show, breaking down these games really, really deep. Rich, one last comment before we finish conference championship.
If this was any other team, like the Bills, for example, and Mahomes had this issue, I would still say I'm picking Kansas City. So I get, I would just see a scenario where we would be talking in the offseason about how Mahomes overcame everything in the world, losing Tyreek. He got hobbled and he still went on and won a Super Bowl. And we just turned him into a god amongst men. But not now. I think it's the end of the line for Mahomes. I think it's the end of the line for the Brock Purdy experiment. And
as someone with an NFL media company and our primary thing is an NFL newsletter, I want the narratives. I want the Mahomes story of how he overcame. And from a narrative standpoint, I'd love it if Purdy made it, so then you can say, "Oh, what great story." It's the end of the line for Mahomes.
That was an
Pro Football
underhanded
Demon.
slap at the Bills, just in case you didn't pick up on it.
Oh, I felt it. I felt it in my soul. I'm mad at you for that.
Kevin's got a spidey sense for that kind of
Oh, absolutely.
I talk a lot for a guy whose team hasn't done
Josh
anything.
Allen.
Just so you know.
It's fair. That's the thing is, like, ultimately objectivity is always going to win out for me. And I love the Bills, but I'm staring in the mirror. They got a way to go to get out of this hole that they're in. Shots are going to be fired, and it's going to be fair. As far as my thoughts on everything today, I just love the comment section. You guys kept the comment section on fire today, and I love Anthony spicing up the some of the back and forth.
Putting our quotes on blast. I love it, Anthony.
Love it, and I'm very excited to receive my apologies from all the people who were questioning our pick for the Eagles next week. That's going to be really fun to receive the validation that we were right, and I'm looking forward to it, guys. I think Eagles and Bengals is going to be an unreal Super Bowl, and that's going to be one that's going to be unbelievable to pick. And if I'm wrong, I'll be happy, because I'll be happy for Purdy, and I'll be happy that Apple's sad. So either way, it's a good win for me. I'm happy. He'll
be a sour apple.
Oh, let's go. Let's go. That's good.
But I would be happy to see any of these games. I'm happy to see 49ers Bengals, 49ers Chiefs, Eagles, it doesn't matter. It's nice to have just 4 teams and not some outlier. These are the 4 best teams in the NFL. The Super Bowl matchup is guaranteed to be phenomenal, no matter who wins either of these games. Yeah. David mentioned, asked in the chat, am I going to be on 49ers Rush? Absolutely, I am. 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. I will be on John Chapman's 49ers Rush. My awesome. Analysis will be the same, David, so you know I'm going to pick the Eagles, but we will go deep. I'm looking forward to talking to John about the game. Aaron Rodgers in New York, his skin is way too thin for the New York media, would be a treat to watch.
Yeah, and this
would be entertaining.
This whole narrative that his skin is too thin for the New York media, I think the New York media would give him everything he's ever wanted, and that is all the attention
You're
in
right.
the world.
For 1 year.
All the attention in the world. And if he even goes to an AFC Championship game, he's going to be a king in New York. So I think the New York media actually plays into that.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody. I'm glad, Kevin, you mentioned the chat. Thank you so much, everybody who was watching live the whole time, talking in the chat, bringing us some awesome comments and questions. Thank you for everybody who is listening. Please, if you don't already, like and subscribe to the channel. We're going to be bringing you content all year long. I can't wait to get it. I mean, I don't want to let go of football itself, but Rich, you mentioned it. Super Bowl ends. Okay, we're on to the draft. We're on to free agency. We're on to this. Where does Derek Carr go? Where does Aaron Rodgers go? What is Brady going to do? Who's going to be? What coach is going to be hired? It never stops. It's year-round. Legit football is year-round. Our podcast is year-round. Thank you to the Pro Football Demon, Rich Joe Dice, and Kevin Phillip Fox for joining. We'll definitely have these guys on next week. We'll revisit the game and start to look at the Super Bowl. Maybe we'll have a Pro Bowl flag football Manning versus Manning preview. Who knows? I don't know. We'll figure it out. But thank you so much, guys, for tuning in with us. This has been Legit Football. We'll see you next week.